Welcome back, everyone. Let's go ahead and take a look at the iPhone 10, 10R, and iPhone 11 to see how they hold up in 2022. Now, what I will definitely tell you is that between all these devices, they are all a little bit different. They're all not supposed to be, I guess, direct competitors to one another. The iPhone 10 came out in 2017, the iPhone 10R came out in 2018, the iPhone 11 came out in 2019. So there are a few years, there's 1 year in between each of these. The iPhone 10 to the iPhone 11 is a big gap. The iPhone 10R to the iPhone 10 and 11 are also pretty big gaps as well. Now, with something like the iPhone 11, this is probably the iPhone I would recommend majority of people to go ahead and purchase. This device has more capability, in my opinion, than these two devices. It has better battery life, it has, just better performance, and the longevity and the ease of capability in buying something like an iPhone 11. It's much easier to pick up something like an iPhone 11 nowadays than an iPhone 10R or an iPhone 10. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, you can go and buy an iPhone 11, by going up to the Apple Store, going into Best Buy, and picking it up that way. With something like the iPhone 10R, it was kind of easy to buy at one point, but it's not so easy to buy it anymore, and that's kind of an issue in my opinion. It's not a big deal, but it is one of those things to keep in mind. Something like the iPhone 10, again, this came out in 2017. It's a little bit dated now, not a big deal. But when I look at all these devices, there is a lot of overlap. You can buy an iPhone 10 right now in the used market for about $200 and something. The iPhone 10 and 10 are about the same price, to be honest. The iPhone 11 you can buy for around $350 to $400 in the used market as well, probably even cheaper than that. But there could not be more similarities and more differences to one of these than the others, if that makes any sense. Now, with the iPhone 10 compared to the other ones, we had the stainless steel band around the phone, which is probably the biggest difference from this device to the other ones. We had a dual camera setup, which looked beautiful, full glass back, wireless charging, all that good stuff. And on the front of this phone, we had a 5.8-inch OLED display. I think it was like a super whatever it was. And this was a really good panel. This was the first time we got an OLED display on any iPhone, and it came out for the iPhone 10. This was a $1,000 phone when it first came out. We had the notch, which came out for the first time on this panel as well. And overall, when I look at this phone, I think it still looks very beautiful. I think it still looks very good. And there are very few things to complain about. Again, it's not quite perfect, but I think it looks really, really good for sure. Now, with something like the iPhone 10R, on the other hand, this is still a really good feeling phone too. So on the back, we do have the same glass back that we have on the iPhone 10, not a frosted glass back or anything like that. We have a single camera setup up here too. We have flashlight, LED light, whatever it is, wireless charging, IP certification on this phone too. The band of this phone doesn't feel quite as premium as the iPhone 10, but it still feels really good for the most part. It feels pretty much in line with like an iPhone 13. Now on the front, we had a 6.1-inch IPS panel. Now this was the thing that kind of threw people off, especially like me the most. I didn't understand why they went from, like an OLED panel on here to an IPS 750p panel here. But again, this was a different phone. This was not supposed to be a replacement to the iPhone 10. This was supposed to be kind of a cheaper alternative if you didn't want to spend that much money on something like an iPhone, 10s or 10s Max. You can buy this thing and still get a really good panel. This thing had a bigger battery than the 10s, also had a bigger battery than the iPhone 10. So it's kind of strange that Apple put a bigger battery on a phone like this rather than their other ones, which is very, very, kind of insane. Lightning port at the bottom as well, so not really a massive difference from the iPhone 10 looking nowadays, but it really was a pretty big difference at that point. Going from 2017 to 2018, some pretty big differences. All these iPhones in 2018 they all had notches. They didn't even have home buttons. Now we go to something like an iPhone 11, which is still current because this thing is still being sold brand new by Apple. So with this thing, first of all, sleek back looking. I love the feeling of this phone. I love the white back of this phone as well. Looks much better on the camera. With the dual camera setup here too. So we had the wide and ultra wide. So immediately we're getting kind of like the dual glimpses of both these phones. However, we didn't have a telephoto like the iPhone 10. We're getting that ultra wide on this device, which immediately made me feel so much better about a device like this. Now, kind of the same thing on the back, wireless charging. We do have IP certification on this phone as well. The band of this phone is identical to the iPhone 10R, so it doesn't feel really that much more expensive. It feels about the same thing as the iPhone 10R, but it still feels very good all throughout. Lightning port at the bottom as well. On the front, pretty much the same panel, 6.1-inch IPS panel, Retina IPS panel, whatever you want to call it. And it's still a really good looking panel for sure. The weird thing is, you would think with a phone like this that it doesn't look as good as the premium, generations that we have now. It doesn't perform as well or anything like that. But to be honest, this panel still feels and looks pretty current. I don't think this is a outdated design. I don't think it looks ugly or anything like that. And I think that's one of the more interesting things about these type of devices. With an iPhone 11, the notch and everything, that's still current with the iPhone 13. And the fact that this is $499 brand new, even cheaper than that in the, used market, this is probably the device I would recommend more people to buy nowadays. So what I would kind of recommend you to do is kind of look at how much budget you have And if you're looking at something like the iPhone 10, I would recommend going up to the iPhone 11. If you're looking at something like the iPhone 10R, I would recommend going up to the iPhone 11 as well. This is a very good step here of like some type of device that came out that is still relevant so many years later. And when I look at the iPhone 11, this type of device I think has a better future ahead of it. With the iPhone 10, just something about Apple's current design choice, specifically with their software, what they're doing, that really freaks me out about the future of the iPhone 10. The performance is still fine. I mean, you have 3 gigabytes of RAM here, 3 gigabytes of RAM here, but you had 4 gigabytes of RAM here. And because of that, that kind of makes me think that for some reason, especially with iOS 15.4 and 15.4.1, since Apple went ahead and actually changed up a couple of things here and there, I do think with their lack of features that they're giving for this specific phone in general, I think that this is probably going to be a time where I'm going to start shifting away from recommending the iPhone 10 to a ton of people to start recommending more something like the iPhone 11. Although this device isn't perfect either, you are definitely going to be getting a much better performing phone. And just the future of the iPhone 11, there's more of a future with this device than there is with this device. So I could sit here and do a speed comparison and everything, but I've already done speed comparisons between all these devices as well. And from what I saw, the iPhone 11 I think is the faster one as well, but the iPhone 10 from 2017 with its gesture-based design still feels very smooth and still feels very premium. Whenever I go through this phone and I kind of maneuver through it, it feels very good. But it feels like with every phone after it, it feels like it's not as smooth as it. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the IPS panel versus the OLED panel. But even when I mess with my iPhone 13, it seems like the panel is a little bit more stutterier in a way than something like the iPhone 10, which is so weird. I don't know if that's placebo or something. But I'm scrolling through. That's kind of the vibe I get, which is so strange. They're all on the same version of software right now as well, 15.4.1. So what I will definitely tell you is, if you're in 2022, which I'm pretty sure you are if you're watching this right now, I would recommend going up to something like the iPhone 11. This is definitely the phone that wins in every single category in my opinion. You're getting better battery life, you're getting better performance, you're getting better build quality, not better build quality per se than the iPhone 10, but better than the iPhone 11. Better than the iPhone 10R. You're getting a better camera setup as well. And this is the only camera between these two that have, or between these three, that has an ultra-wide sensor. The iPhone 10 doesn't have an ultra-wide sensor, and the iPhone 10R does not have an ultra-wide sensor. And in my opinion, this is probably the better camera that I would probably recommend more people to buy. And this is something that I would probably recommend at the end of the day, more people to pick up than something like an iPhone 10 or an iPhone 10R. I think the iPhone 10R is still a good phone too. If you don't want to, if you find an iPhone 10R for a pretty good value, I would recommend going for it. I've been having some weird issues with the current version of software with this specific phone, and that's the only thing that kind of throws me off with recommending this phone right now to a majority of people. I think this device is still really good. Like I said, I don't have too much to complain about, but I do think if you have the money, go to the iPhone 11. But the 10R with its Apple A12 Bionic chip inside of it, and with 3 gigabytes of RAM, it's still a pretty fast performing phone. And like I mentioned, I think for majority of things you're going to do with it, I think it's going to be perfectly fine. I think with something like the iPhone 10 though, this is kind of deceiving. It feels like a very, very good premium phone, still feels very current. And it still has a future ahead of it, another 2 years, probably 3 years maybe if we're lucky. So I think we're in good sign for something like the iPhone 10 lasting for quite a bit of time as well. But I think when it comes down to it, the iPhone 11 is the one I would recommend out of all three of these, but the iPhone 10 still feels and performs very, very well, way better than a lot of you may think. It's just the future of these devices that kind of concerns me a little bit. So that kind of covers it up. If you have any other questions or anything like that, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.